Hey, how are you? I'm Anderson, this is Kill 10 Rats, and we are about to launch into Ironsworn, Chapter 1, Episode 2. Before we do so, let me do the YouTuber thing and ask you to click all the various bells and whistles, and let's get right to it. So when last we joined Kynan, the hero, not really, of our story, he was on a beach, having just seemingly survived a shipwreck that he has trouble recalling how he ended up on said ship. The last thing he does remember is that he went on what turned out to be the final heist of his band of ancient ruin explorers somewhere far in the north of these Ironlands, and that through some betrayal of their leader Kalidas, his close companion Siora died, and he almost perished. He's a bit hazy on the details. The last thing he recalls is Siora's death scream and things going dark, and then he's all of a sudden now in the south of the Ironlands, very cold and wet and shivering, and he made a vow to find Kalidas and make him pay. Now, as he found out in the last episode, Siora, his previous dead companion, also joined him because she's not too happy being dead, and she partly blames him, so he is now haunted, which expresses itself in a card we have called Spiritbound. Gives us some advantages and also some nice roleplay potential. We spent most of the last episode making vows, looting through various crates and barrels and things to equip ourselves, and encountering some salvagers that were about to do the same, where Kynan, feeling threatened in his livelihood, chose to not negotiate but just attack them from stealth and took them both down fairly swiftly. He's a competent fighter and an even more competent infiltrator and ambusher. Now, as we rejoin Kynan today, he has just finished making a vow to Siora's spirit presence that he will find her remains and lay her to rest, because that is what she asked him to do. Since she's pretty much in the same location as Kalidas betrayed our party, I think this is reflected in the distance and the journey we have to make to fulfill this vow, at least an extreme vow, maybe not an epic vow, because we don't have to actually take revenge after we found the location, so we'll mark that as extreme. And we now have to, before we enter back into the fiction, have to roll for this vow, because this is our inciting incident vow, and we actually rolled that one. Now, what do we have to do? When you swear upon iron to complete a quest, write your vow and give the quest a rank. We did that. Then roll plus heart. If we make this vow to a person or community with whom we share a bond, add +1. Now, we don't really share a bond in the bond technical terms of the rule set, but we are spirit bound with Siora, so I'm gonna take the liberty of taking that +1. So we're gonna roll our action dice against the challenge dice, and then we are looking for how we... Oh boy. On a miss, you face a significant obstacle before you can begin your quest. Envision what stands in your way and choose one. Now, we definitely lose 2 of the momentum we built up in the last episode because we are facing some obstacle that we have to now overcome. Now, let me think, what's the situation here? We're on the beach, we're shivering, cold, drenched. I guess the most obvious obstacle would be that the friends and compatriots of those 2 are missing them dearly and looking for what has become of them. Now, I don't want to make this into an immediate combat encounter, especially because I think we're going to be vastly outnumbered and Kynan is not going to take that fight. So let's roll into the fiction. Kynan finishes his vow to Siora, and realizing now, with the adrenaline wearing off and with the situation calming down to some extent, that he is freezing to the bone, having just spent some time in the water, and he makes the decision to strip off his leather armored coat and take the padded surcoat that the deserter was wearing that he killed. And as he strips that over his head and pokes his head out the top, he in the distance sees a flicker of movement in the direction that the deserter and his friend were coming from, that are now lying bleeding at his feet. Now, Kynan, if anything, is a survivor, and he interprets this correctly as the glint of armor, the glint of metal, which he doesn't take to be a good sign coming from the direction that those 2 actually wandered in from. So he grabs his leather coat off the ground and just turns and quickly strides in the other direction, like keeping low and trying to keep some of the wreckage between him, trying to move with a line of sight that conceals his movements with the movement of the waves a little bit so they don't immediately spot him. I think I want to ask the Oracle whether or not they are spotting Kynan and catching up to him. I think likely is that they don't and that they're moving slower than him. So he's aware of them, they're not really aware of him yet. They just know that the two guards that they had posted during the night have disappeared and that they are following their tracks in the sand. So I say them spotting Kynan is unlikely. Let's see if they do. Oh my god. 76 would have been yes, 75 is a no. So what would that look like? Yeah, I think from the perspective of the raider party that is wandering down the beach now, they have this brief glimpse of movement in the distance while following the tracks of their comrades and sort of write it off as it's just a bird. So Kynan gets away for now, but we'll keep it in mind that those guys exist and that they're kind of tied into this quest for now. I think we're gonna acquire some pursuers. Now the next thing we're gonna do is undertake a journey. We are going to mark progress until we reach one of the settlements that are doubtlessly somewhere here on the coast. I think they're pretty close by. I think this is just a troublesome journey and we're just going to see what happens along the way. So let's briefly picture this scene. We are leaving behind the wreckage. We're coming across little other remnants of our fallen vessel as Kynan progresses along the beach. Next to him a sheer cliff face that he cannot easily scale. The beach is just rocky and littered with broken stone, making it awkward to walk except for that small piece of sand that is constantly being lapped at by the waves coming in from the sea. So Kynan has the choice of moving either across the rocks and moving very slowly or moving across the sand and leaving a trail. He wants to move quickly because he thinks that's his asset for now until the party that is currently behind him figures out what happens and catches up to his track. And even then he thinks he can still outmove them, as if anything he's good at escaping and surviving. That's kind of his thing. So let's undertake this journey and see whether we can reach a waypoint. Okay, so we roll a 2 versus 2 2s and our wits is 2. That's a lot of 2s, which also makes it a match again. That's the second match we roll in a fairly short order. That means something positive happens and also means we have a strong hit, so we reach a waypoint. Let's check in with the Oracle what this waypoint could be. 46 Morn, okay. 44 Faction. Are we finding more bodies of our former band, maybe? Well, let's mark 3 progress first to signify this waypoint that we reach, and as a strong hit as well, we need to make a choice whether we want to make quick progress, so we move at speed at the cost of 1 supply and adding 1 of our momentum, or we're conservative of our resources and we don't use supply. I think we use the supply and gain the momentum just because Kynan is moving fast. Let me just roll up a quick Ironlander name here from the Ironsmith supplement. What is with these rolls? Okay. So Finner, Ironsmith, by the way, a fan-made supplement for Ironsworn, which is excellent. It's a collection of additional oracles, rules, that kind of thing. Very nice, very good, quality work. And just for the sake of completion, we're also gonna give Finner a couple of character traits so Kynan can't remember him better. 79 and 45. That makes him a arrogant liberal. Okay, I wonder what his Twitter handle is. Kynan makes fast progress. He bounds along the beach, making sure to walk in the shore and trying to get the waves to conceal his footsteps a little bit, even though, you know, where is he gonna go unless he's turned around, coming towards the party. he's gonna go in the other direction. It's not gonna be hard to figure out where he went. But he makes the effort and he makes good pace. He has some quick bites as he walks, more like almost jogs along. And after a while, maybe about a half an hour, 45 minutes, hard to keep track of time, he comes across a scene where first off he just interprets it as birds sitting on wreckage. He sees the usual detritus of the ship that went under, and there's a flock of seagulls roosting in a clump in the middle of it all. And as he comes closer, they take offense at his presence and scatter into the air with loud screeches. And Kynan sees that they were actually having a meal, and he recognizes the meal as Finner, his former compatriot who apparently also was on that ship. And his reaction is somewhat stoic. He just stops, pauses very briefly, looks down at him, and yeah, it's not a pretty scene. His eyes are already gone, birds just go for the softest parts first. Most of his face is missing, it's gruesome. But Kynan is used to gruesome. And he just impassively looks down on him and just allows himself maybe half a minute to remember him, and also hears Siora's voice in his ear just whispering Finner's name as she recognizes him too. But he's got that urgency in the back of his mind, that, you know, drive to move on that doesn't really allow for sentimentality right now. So he just briefly says, "Finner, always thought you knew better." And the good thing that happens to Kynan, based on that match that we rolled, I think, is to find Finner's sword that he still has on his belt with him. So we have a sword now, and it's an iron sword. It's what is a prized possession in the Ironlands. So we're picking that up, writing it down, and since we want to move fast, we're discarding the hand axe, so he just takes the hand axe and tosses it into the sea, girds the sword around his waist, as he already starts moving forward again, and marches on. That is a weak hit, so we mark progress and reach another waypoint. This is good, but we also lose one supply here. So I think at the point where we reach the next waypoint, we've moved almost half the day, so it's drawing on noon, the sun is high in the sky, the breeches that Kynan hasn't changed are dry now, the shivering is subsided somewhat, especially since he's wearing that dry, well, bloody coat, padded coat. So let's work out the next waypoint. 83, support, that sounds good. 77, problem, support problem. We get help, I think. Now I'm tempted to just find another cache of resources to bump up our supply, but I don't think that's very interesting. It's just kind of an old hat at this point, so I think we're gonna meet somebody on the beach that is able to point us in the direction of the village that we're looking for, that we don't know, you know, where it is, but we just know there's gotta be a settlement around here somewhere, some fisher village or something. So who are we meeting? Let's see, are we meeting a group of people or are we meeting a single person? Let's make it 50-50. Upwards of 50 is a person. We meet a person. What kind of person are we meeting? We're meeting a 18 cooperative person, so that's the disposition, who is 34. Insightful, okay. Anything more? Resourceful, okay. So it's quite a competent fella we're meeting here, or fellowette. Let me just picture someone to see what comes to mind here first. So at this point, Kynan has walked quite a way. He's drawing up to a sort of a crook in the cliff face where it bends northward. Right now we're just following the coastline, sort of east to west. And there it bends northward, and as we come closer to that drop in the cliff face, it's recognizable that it's sort of the mouth of a fjord that we're coming up towards, and that gives Kynan some hope, because settlements tend to be, you know, farther back down the fjord, so he thinks he wants to go follow that cliff, because where else is he gonna go? And at that point where he's turning into the actual fjord proper, he sees a figure standing at the, you know, beach, sort of half in the water, coming up to his ankles. And it's an old man, wispy white hair, long beard, wearing almost like a priest-like outfit, like a white cloak and some tunic underneath. The cloak's hem almost like touching the water, bare feet. And he's holding a basket of fish in his hand. And Kynan is trying to work out how he's fishing because he's not really got any fishing implements with him. No spear, no fishing rod, no nothing. And he sees a shape sort of bursting forth from the water, alighting on the man's shoulder, and him having what seems to be like a short dialogue, and then all of a sudden he has a fish in his hand and dumps it into the basket. And Kynan at this point is close enough to hear what the old guy is saying to what appears to be a bird on his shoulder, and as Kynan is close he can recognize that bird as a cormorant. And he hears this sort of wispy voice on the wind saying, "The next one is for you, old friend." Kynan doesn't recognize this one as a threat, but more as a insightful, helpful resource that he might apply, because he wants to know how far he is from the next settlement, and that there is a person out here fishing gives him some hope that he's close to one. Now he doesn't want to scare the old guy in any way, so as he walks closer to him, he kind of makes sure that he walks a little bit into his field of view and splashes his feet a little bit so he can be heard. And the old man, like the bird alights from the shoulder again, dives back into the water, and the old man turns around. "Ah, so there have been survivors." Kynan is taken aback, so this old guy apparently knows about his predicament, his shipwreck, and this makes him suspicious, so he instinctively sort of his hand drops on the pommel of the sword he's acquired, and the old man sort of correctly interprets this as having created a question in his head there, and sort of placatively raises his hands and goes, "Do not be alarmed, we saw your vessel go by, and the Straits was unruly last night. Small wonder you shattered on these rocks, you had no business sailing there in a storm like this." And Kynan, still leaving his hand there, goes, "Wasn't by choice." "Ah, what does it matter now? You're safe and sound on the shore, and the Straits' temperament has subsided. It was in quite a mood these last few days. I wonder what riled it up so." Now, Kynan is sort of wondering, because this is the Ironlands, and there are temperamental forces that exist around in water, straits, and forests and mountains. So he wonders, is this guy just rambling lunacy? Or is there actually a force at work here that brought down the ship with almost an agenda of some sort? So he asks, "Are you saying a primordial sunk us?" "That is your word, but the strait has a name. If you listen to the wind, you might learn it." And Kynan kind of sees this as confirmation that there is some, primordial power, one of the primordial creatures that exist in the Ironlands that inhabits this strait, and that the ship sailing through there for whatever reason caused some offense and just riled up the primordial enough to sink the ship. So we at least we pieced together what happened to the ship now. But I don't think at this point Kynan has more interest in like some kind of metaphysical debate, so he just gets his priorities straight and asks, "Listen, old man, I need to resupply. Is there a village nearby?" "Oh yes, there is indeed. Just walk along this path some more. You have no way of missing it." I think at this point Kynan is kind of done with this guy whose cormorant just re-emerges and has a meal for himself. I just nods curtly and keeps wondering. Just hearing this voice on the wind behind him is going like, "Safe travels!" Which he hopes for too. So let's see if we make our journey to this destination now. So we mark more progress and we lose more supply. We are running low of whatever little bits of rations we have found, and we really need to find that village now. So we're gonna hit another waypoint, but I think this one's gonna be the last. 15 raid. 35 history, raid history, what the? I think what we're gonna find here is a potential for a delve later on in case we want to do it, in case we want to pursue this. So Kynan, as an experienced ruin explorer, recognizes in the cliff face the signs of an entrance that appears to be non-natural, at least, you know, widened and somewhat man-made, or, you know, sentient creature manipulated. Who knows whether it were men. So let's just mark down that there's an entrance to a delve site near the village, where we can potentially go in and raid history if we want to. And since I want to mark down where it is, I also want to get this village a name. So we're gonna go towards 64 Stone, 28 Ridge. Stone Ridge. Well, I guess with this being located as sort of in the mouth of a fjord, it kind of makes sense. And since we have accumulated 9 progress on our journey track now, we would definitely like to reach our destination, which is a progress move, so we roll our challenge dice against the accumulated progress. And we strong hit this one, so we take 1 momentum for this, I think, because that is the best option for us at this point. And I think without rolling too much for the settlement, what I envision here is at the narrow end of the fjords, there is a sort of a rise in the territory. So the cliff kind of fades away and there is a path leading up towards the higher ground and the flat land up above. And at the nape of this, there are a bunch of houses on stilts, so elevated houses, very weather-beaten, you know, clearly been there for a while. And there's boats moored to wooden gangplanks there and racks of fish splayed and drying in the sun along the beach where Kynan is approaching. So that's kind of the first thing he runs into and sort of smells that on the wind. And it's maybe a settlement of about 150 souls in total, possibly, like looking at the amount of houses and, you know, just estimating how many people that could be. And as he comes closer, he sees them sitting in that semicircular arrangement of houses and connected by wooden walkways, mending baskets and nets and doing general fisherman stuff. And as we walk towards these racks of drying fish, we run into our first person, our first villager. So let's see how that villager is disposed towards us first. Is that going to be a suspicious villager? Probably. I mean, we're just coming like somewhat armed from the beach where there isn't really much else going on. But let's see. That is actually friendly, 07. That is a friendly disposition. So we do have a friendly Ironlander on our hands. What are they like? 08, armed, okay. So this person has a weapon on them. Maybe for good reason, like if he walked out of the village proper, distant a ways, maybe the fact that we did encounter those salvager raiders somewhat in the vicinity, like half a day away, is not lost on the villagers either, and they are struggling with them, perhaps, like getting regular raids or just the occasional encroachment and them stealing something, like we don't know. So he's armed and strong. Okay, he's armed and strong. And the name is, I say he, let's see whether the name gives us a clue. Bastion. I think that's a he. I think he's mending the rack, one of the fishing racks that is used to dry the fish. And sort of out of the corner of his eye, he already sees that movement of the stranger approaching and turns his head. And since he's strong, I picture this sort of burly fellow, blonde beard streaked with grey, long hair and sort of big forearms, just wearing this sort of tunic, right, sleeveless, having hung his jacket over one of the posts and working a hammer, but with a hand axe on his side, like just can't be too careful. We determine he's friendly, so his first reaction will maybe be like just a jaunty, like, "Oh there, stranger," and Kynan, raises his sword hand in greeting, making sure it stays away from that pommel. "What brings you to Stone Ridge?" And Kynan doesn't really see a need for deception and just tells it like it is. "Ship got lost in the storm." "Aye, that was quite a mess last night. You were trying to cross the Narrows, right? Sailed right into those hidden rocks and that reef over there." Okay, enough. And Kynan just nods. "Ah, but what is that you're wearing?" And at this point, Kynan realizes that he's wearing that raider's deserter's coat, and thinks like, "Oh dear, this is going sour now, because this is obviously like a deserter's coat of arms." And the first thing that comes to mind is for him to just say, "It's not mine." And we've got Bastion like nodding at him, grinning. It's like, I know it's not yours. I've seen that coat before. You've done us a service by acquiring it." Kynan is sort of apprehensive, not really sure where this is going, so he doesn't really respond at the moment, just looks at Bastion. "Ah, don't look at me like that, stranger. I am Bastion. Welcome to Stone Ridge. What is your name?" And Kynan tells him his name and moves a little bit closer, and they shake, and Bastion sort of claps him on the shoulder and almost pushes him towards the village as he falls in step beside him. "Where were you headed on your ship?" That's a good question. Kynan does not know. The last thing he remembers is being way the hell north and nowhere near this place. "I wish I knew." And Bastion frowns and grins and is like, "It's a long story, I take it. Perhaps you can tell me later." And with a bit more superficial chit-chat, mainly with Bastion talking and pointing out things in the village, they make their way to Bastion's home, which is a stilt-based wooden bigger shack that it's just one of these weather-beaten houses that are semi-circular arranged. And I think at this point we fast forward a little bit, where Kynan gets taken into Bastion's family. His wife is in there making some food, children running around, like a gaggle of 5 kids at various ages getting underfoot. And they're friendly, they're welcoming, they resupply Kynan, and he gets the chance to sojourn in the village now to get his supplies back up. Our heart is not the best, but what the hell is this now? Okay. So I think we get fully kitted out, resupplied to make our way, as Kynan indicates that he intends to travel back north. That's where he wants to go, and he inquires what the best way is over land and over sea, and where could he find some support in this. And obviously the villagers can't just row him to the north, so they recommend he take the road north. But I think the good thing that happens during this is that they also tell him that they intend to go north to trade the next day, and that they are, with him being armed, that "You look like you can help yourself. Would you accompany us on our trading journey to offer a bit of protection?" And Kynan would agree to that, and so he's got an opportunity there to start off the journey on a good footing, and with full supplies and some company. I think that's a good interpretation of that result. And so as dusk breaks over this fishing village of Stone Ridge, and we have Kynan sitting down for dinner with the family of Bastion, with the prospect of leaving northward bound with their trading party the next morning. We're gonna pick back up there next time, so thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye for now.